is Syl Woolford, and today I'm excited about doing some Wilmington history. If you ask most Wilmingtonians who was the first African-American city councilman, they would tell you that it was John Hopkins Sr. John Hopkins Sr. was an impressive African-American city councilman here in Wilmington for 32 years. And again, for those of us who go back far enough, we know that he owned the National Theater, the Black Theater in Wilmington, and he also owned the Hopkins Theater. But John Hopkins was not the first African-American city councilman. The first African-American city councilman was Thomas Postles, and he was elected to the city council in 1901. And 1901 is 14 years before Hopkins became city councilman. So he was really a pioneer and a groundbreaker. He was elected in 1901, and obviously this was an incredible event for the city of Wilmington. And so there was much celebration about him having been elected. He was supported by a gentleman by the name of John Edward Attucks. Attucks was a politician who came from Pennsylvania with lots of money. And he came to Delaware because he thought he could be made a U.S. Senator quicker if he were here in Delaware. And I don't want to say politics was corrupt, but it was a different kind of political situation than we have now. And Thomas Postles was on his team. He was called a Attucks Republican. It wasn't even called a Republican. These were Attucks Republican. He had his own political organization. And Thomas Postles rode in on this wave of this Attucks movement of Attucks rising to political prominence here in the city of Wilmington and in the state of Delaware. The first time Thomas Postles got elected to city council, basically he obeyed whatever the Republicans told him to do, and he got along very well. And obviously there was great prestige associated with him being the first African-American city councilman. But by the time he was elected the second time, he had whole different ideas on what was going on. He had learned the political situation. He learned about patronage jobs, and there were lots of patronage jobs. The politicians brought in their workers on their political campaigns and gave them jobs. And Postles had figured all of this out. At the time he was elected the second time, there were 6 Republicans and there were 6 Democrats. He figured out quickly that he was the deciding vote. And although he was elected as an Attucks Republican, he decided that maybe he should vote with the Democrats, because maybe there was more in it for him. So he made a deal with the Democrats for him to vote with them, and they were going to give him these patronage jobs. As a good politician, and he had become a good politician, the first thing he did was put his son on the payroll, which is what every good politician should do. Folks began to figure out what he was doing, and this began to hit not only the local papers, but the national papers. An example of the national papers that were covering this particular story, or covering Thomas Postles, the headlines of the paper said Negro Rules. And this again is 1905 is when we're talking about, and we are really talking about a segregated Wilmington and a segregated America. But here we have the headlines of the paper saying Negro Rules. And everybody knew what he was doing. Everybody knew how politics works. And everybody knew that he had gained control basically of the city of Wilmington, and was working with the Democrats and was passing any bills that they wanted to pass, and was taking care of their friends and also taking care of his friends. He even got the city veterinarian was an African American. He got him appointed to that position. And again, this was surprising not only for Wilmington but for the whole country, that here was the city of Wilmington where a Negro ruled. And the papers just went into details of how he had basically embarrassed Attucks by basically turning traitor on him, or playing more politics than he could play. And so the newspapers of the day just wrote it up and said Negro Rules. And then the other newspapers, and again, these newspapers are out-of-town newspapers. This is Kansas City, this is Boston, this is Baltimore. Said Negro, a city's ruler. And you sit there and you read this paper and you say, well, was he the mayor, or was he the governor, or was it? Said, no, he was just a normal politician, playing the rules as he was making them up as he went along. And the objective was not helping the city, but this was helping himself. And he boasted about what he was doing. And made all kinds of comments about, now I'm in charge, and basically they got to come to me if they want to get something done. And all of this was showing up in the newspaper. And he was not making many friends as he went along. They actually tried to get some laws passed to slow him down. We were talking about what was called Jim Crow Wilmington. Jim Crow Wilmington was blacks couldn't eat at restaurants, couldn't go into saloons, and couldn't go into movie theaters except for the National Theater or the Hopkins Theater. So they were going to ban Thomas Postles from going into any restaurants because he thought he was a big politician, so he was eating at all the restaurants in town. So they decided they were going to come up with some of these Jim Crow laws which hadn't been enforced, and they were going to throw him in jail for going into a restaurant. They were trying to get him any way they could. They were trying to get rid of this guy. He was causing havoc, and he was basically putting the city into bankruptcy because everybody was getting their bill passed. People were spending money, borrowing money. He didn't care as long as he was getting his money. The papers again continued to print up what he was doing and talked about plenty of woes in Wilmington, were one of the headlines of the newspaper, and talked about what this guy was doing and how he had outsmarted the politicians here in Wilmington. He even got smarter than that, or wiser than that. He decided to put together his own political party. He had something called the Postles Club, which were African Americans in the city of Wilmington who were supporting him. Rather than being Democrats or Republicans, they were just his club members, which helped him get elected, and he would help them get jobs. And this became a statewide organization. There were Thomas Postles clubs in most of the major cities here in Delaware, and he was ready to take over and take over the state because he had figured out how politics worked. So he continued, and these Thomas Postles clubs, they wanted Thomas Postles' picture to be put in the lobby of city council, so that everybody would know who was running the show. And they were making a legend out of Postles during his lifetime. And so he was just this incredible political figure in early 1900s, when again blacks couldn't even get sandwiches at restaurants, or couldn't even go to, as those who go back couldn't go to the Queen's Theater, or couldn't go to the White Movie Theater, or those kinds of things. But Thomas Postles was doing it all, and again couldn't get this guy under control. Now we wonder why we haven't heard of Thomas Postles. He only lasted for 4 or 5 years. He died by accident of ptomaine poisoning. And ptomaine poisoning is, they don't have the forensic sciences that we have today. So ptomaine poisoning just means he ate something or drank something and died. I don't want to claim that he was poisoned, but there were a lot of folks who would like to have seen Thomas Postles go. And so he died very much ahead of his time. Again, he was a businessman here in Wilmington. He ran a hotel, he ran several businesses, and he came on the scene very early as a politician, as a groundbreaker. And again, if he had lived, I'm sure that Johns Hopkins wouldn't have achieved what he achieved, and would be remembering Thomas Postles as the most incredible African American politician in the city of Wilmington.